Welcome back to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Your host, Tomas Keenan, coming at you guys today from the home office. I decided not to go into the office today because I just didn't want to go. I'm just going to be real about it. I woke up and had a late night. Long story short here, Dr. Douglas Brackmann's with us, and we're going to introduce him in a second. But we just finalized moving out of our Salt Lake City, Utah home, and because I had two houses here for about a year, finalized moving out of that home and moved everything back here to Texas. And we've been in the go mode for the last 2 weeks, just moving all this stuff. And even though I've been in this home now here in Texas about a year, I'm now unpacking another house worth of shit into my home. So it's like, man, I thought I just did this, and here we are back at it again. So needless to say, it's been a little hectic and crazy over here in the land of Tomas Keenan and Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. But anyway, grateful to have Dr. Doug Brackmann with us here today. And this guy's pretty interesting so far. We've chatted a bit. He's an author. He's about to be an author for the second time.
Yep.
Say again?
I said, yep.
Oh, yeah. Good. And, you know, as a fellow author, I understand the amount of work that's required in order to make that a reality. So you going for it for a second time, you've got to have a couple of screws loose, like some of the other people that I know, including myself. It is definitely a project, and it seems to be one of those never-ending projects. And then all of a sudden, one day it's done and things are moving. So with that being said, welcome to the show, sir. I'm excited to dive in deep and have a good conversation with you today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Yeah, you are just the few minutes I've gotten to know you, you are exactly what I do. I've been working with people like you for literally my whole life.
Yeah.
So, and I've become really an expert in what we are. And I do mean we. I am one of you. And we are different. We are definitely different than probably 95% of the population.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so let's backtrack a second here. I want to dive into that for sure, because I've always known that something about me is just a bit different than most people, right? But go back to you being a doctor. From the information that I've done and the research I've gathered from you, sir, you have 2 PhDs. Is that correct?
Yes, and it tells you how profoundly insecure I actually am. So it's totally ridiculous. It is way too much education, but I was hoping something called the imposter syndrome would go away with multiple PhDs, and it didn't work. So, but it led me down a path of really understanding what the imposter syndrome is. So I don't regret it.
Let's dive into imposter syndrome, because that's a term that's thrown around in my world all the time. I hear it from clients all the time. I've dealt with it. Give me your professional opinion on what because I've heard so many definitions on what imposter syndrome is. From your professional doctor's view, what is imposter syndrome and what can we do to get over it?
So it is it points to, I'm very Carl Jungian in my understanding of how people work. And so we have an inner world and an outer world. And, Dr. Jim Spira, my PhD chair, when he shook my hand for the first time and I got called doctor for the first time in my life, my inner world experience was a sense of almost disappointment. And, I thought it would feel different than it did. And those sensations coming up from my body hit my monkey mind, and my monkey mind immediately came up with the statement, haha, he bought it. And so it was this, I faked it all the way through. And so it is, this inner world versus outer world. And when you expect something to feel, when you expect something to feel wonderful and it doesn't, and it is this anticipatory disappointment, and that is really what we experience as drivens. We have a dopamine deficiency. We have a set of genetics that wire us to anticipate great reward, but then when we finally achieve what we think is going to get us that reward, we don't experience it that way. So there's about 3, 4, 5% of the population that are really wired for this chronic state of discontentment. And that is what we are. That's part of the genetics.
That's rough, dude. I'm not gonna lie. When you put the stats there, I mean, what's wrong with us that we, as driven humans, right? Because I went on your website, I took your assessment, and it came back and said you're a very driven person, sir.
Yep.
Right. So
I saw your assessment. So it is. I'll start in my second grade class. I was sitting in second grade, and I couldn't figure out why everyone else in the class was just going along with the party line. Like, it didn't make sense to me why memorizing a bunch of BS spelling words and memorizing multiplication tables would get me anywhere in life. Like, what do you? Oh, and the rest of the class is just going right along with it.
mhm,
And so I knew I was different. I didn't understand why everyone else didn't see through the hypocrisy of everything, and it led me down a path to drug addiction and feeling outside of the herd, feeling very alone, feeling
mm,
very scared, really, most of my life. Well, up until about 17, when I was living in a car after I dropped out of high school, and really had the first epiphany moment of, and without judgment, really looking at yourself and just questioning, what the hell am I doing?
mm.
And it started a process of waking up. And obviously I went back to school and figured some things out. So it has literally been my entire life. And if anyone in psychology ever tells you they're not in the field to figure out their own shit,
You're
they're
a
lying.
liar.
So it all comes back to narcissism. It all
Uh-huh.
comes back to me. But it's been a phenomenal time to be alive as a psychologist. I started grad school in 1991, and we had just received pagers, and
Yeah.
that was a big thing. But we had to pull over when you got a page to go find a payphone. So
Mhm.
it's and I had a Pentium 486 processor. So it's just been a phenomenal world to watch change and grow up
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what's driven? How does this all come about? How do you actually you become a doctor, not once, twice?
Yep.
I'm sure you this is my assumption here. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. You probably go down the traditional path, how doctors are supposed to show up and serve and help people. And then what gets you into what you're doing now?
So again, I'm a high school dropout living in a car, wake up to that. I go and work. I was delivering auto parts for about a year.
Mm,
Um, had this profound knowing that I was always built for more. And
yeah.
that's part of being driven, that I wasn't reaching my potential. I heard that crap my whole life, but went back to school and figured out school. Um, Most drivens tend to hate school. We are not very well versed in it,
Yep.
because it is designed for a different kind of brain.
Mhm.
And so it goes to, and I really rely heavily on the hunter farmer theory. And so about 9,000 years ago, most of the human population adapted to a very sedentary, predictable, safe world. And if you think about what a farmer is, they have a linear, logical way of going through the world. And so they have this thing in their left prefrontal lobe called the executive function.
Mhm.
And it really is, they have only one voice in their head, which is very different from most of the people I know. Um, and this one decider in their head is very simple in the way it goes through the world. And you put your finger in the ground, put a piece of corn in it, then you pat a little dirt on it, then you
Mhm.
water it, and you patiently wait for it to grow. Um, so they're, delayed gratification is part of their world. They really like structure. They really like predictability. They do
Mhm.
not like risk. They don't like risk taking. Um, they're made for, what worked last year will work this year, and God forbid we change it. And um, they're also prone to live in a very simple narrative world, where they have a narrative living in their head, and they became, as we went from little hunter-gatherer groups of entrepreneurial drivens into these massive societies, their identity changed along with it. They
Yeah.
became butchers and bakers and candlestick makers. They just went down this path. That's why me, in going the traditional route of education, I even in grad school I knew I was different, and we as drivens go into a normal, typical psychologist's office, we look crazy.
Mm.
and it is the ADD and ADHD brain. But I dove deep into really understanding how we're different, why we're different, and really what to do about it. It
So,
is a massive curse and
yeah,
obviously a gift.
here's a great question for you on that, right? Do you find that the larger majority or all drivens are ADHD at some level?
Well, it is the defining feature of ADD is the lack of the executive function part of the brain. So you put us in a functional MRI, and one of the few perks about big pharma is they've thrown tons of research at ADD and ADHD because there's money in pills.
Mm,
And so you look at the normal brain, and it's a little ball of energy in the left prefrontal lobe. But you look at the ADD or the ADHD brain, you see the occipital lobe light up, the back of our heads where eyesight is. And then you see these little dots of activity all across the frontal lobe. It's called
mhm,
hypofrontality. And applying that to the hunter farmer theory, very simply, a hunter uses its eyeballs to go through the world. And so we're very, that's why video games are so wildly addicting to us.
yeah.
Because they pull us into the present. Anything that pulls us into that present, we thrive in. Navy SEALs and military special operators, all that, we're suited for that world. The frontal lobe, though, is the interesting part of it, where the executive function part, they have a single thinker in their head, where we have 13 different voices going on at the same time, all of them arguing and coming up with 13 different ideas. But I call it, you took my assessment, but it's we have unbelievable capacity for seeing the big picture,
Yeah.
and more importantly, we have multi-thinking. So
Mhm.
you test the normal norms. 90+% of the human population, they can carry 3 to 7 thoughts in their head. Where you do this with Navy SEALs, real ADDers, ADHDers, we carry anywhere from 7 to 13. So it's almost twice as much capacity in our frontal lobe for tracking multiple targets at the same time.
Mhm.
And I early on, 25 years ago, I was calling this the entrepreneurial mind, because we can look at a unbelievably complex problem and see how unique variables are interacting, and then draw a line through them.
Mhm.
Where everyone's standing around is like, "How did you do that? How did you see that?" And they're like, "How don't you?"
Yeah.
It's like
It's crystal clear.
but that is really the defining feature of driven.
Mm.
And then we have these other genetics that tend to go along with it. You have a dopamine receptor number 2, which is boredom.
Ah.
And if you think about, a farmer, they are incredibly tolerant of boring. They are
Mhm.
literally sitting around picking bugs off plants. Where, if we did that, if we did, as a hunter, we would never leave the cave
Yeah.
and go explore. And so we are wired for this sense that there's something missing or wrong when we don't have enough visual stimulation or mental stimulation.
Mhm.
Um, that and there's that is a central component of really the ADD and ADHD. And so people that are really high on their D2, they cannot tolerate watching 20 minutes of TV show. And then our multi-thinking, we immediately can figure out the plot line, and we can see through it anyway. So I know how it's going to end. So what the hell?
Yeah. Why am I watching this?
Why?
Mhm.
Much more interesting. And I'm have a lower D2. I have some, but I'm mostly D4. And
Okay.
dopamine receptor number 4 is the wandering gene.
So hold on one second. Right. As far as dopamine receptors are concerned, how many are there in total?
There's 7
Okay.
different receptors: D1, D2, D3, 4, I believe.
Yeah.
Although it is when we first really cracked the human genome about 15 years ago, we thought it was a fairly simple on-off switch. Now this thing called epigenetics,
Yeah.
where it is. So any of the genome geeks out there want to go down the rabbit hole, Snippedia, which is the webpage for all things genetics, there's
Yeah.
143 different variants associated with boredom as
Wow.
of couple of weeks ago when I was just looking at it. So it is infinitely complex, and so I always get this, well, how do you know if you have it?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not, is it nature versus nurture? You can't even ask that question anymore. It's always an influence of both.
Right.
I can find incredible satiation for my boredom because I'm, a long 25-year meditator. And so the present moment becomes incredibly interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the joke about, when my kids were little, whoever invented the game, Sorry, that little board game that you punch around and I mean, asshole. A horrible game for driven brains. I mean, just monotonous, no plot, but watching my daughter's reactions and watching all of these little tiny things allowed my dopamine to get satiated in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fighting the battle of what, those genetics trigger. So is it a problem or not? But the D4, kind of wrapping that up, is the wandering gene.
Okay.
So it's the FOMO gene, fear of missing out gene. And it makes hunters feel like there's more woolly mammoths over the next hill. The grass is always greener. And so, you mentioned moving a bunch of times. It's like, that's going to be better than here. And so they call it, great expose in National Geographic on it, they call it the wandering gene.
Yeah.
And, we are wired to wander. And so, and all of this next book I got coming out, we really are different.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was scared, and my imposter syndrome, blessing of it, is that it makes me dive deep on stuff just to make sure I'm not, blowing smoke up people's asses. And so it's real. We are different.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's take a couple steps back here for a moment. You've already got one book that's out, published, done. And, prior to us hitting the record button, you were kind of joking around with me and said, man, I had no idea that all the doors that were going to open with this book. So let's backtrack. Give me a recap on what the first book is, what it's about, and tell the listeners here some of the positive things that have happened to you in your life, both personally and professionally, because you've become a published author.
Great question. So Driven, understanding and harnessing the genetic gifts of Navy SEALs, entrepreneurs, professional athletes, and maybe you. So my career started in addiction. I'm a recovering alcoholic, 38 years now, but it started working in rehab, started working in the field of addiction. And these are the, genetics of addiction. So in 1991, when I entered grad school, the Time magazine article came out, we found the alcoholism gene. And that was the dopamine receptor number 2. Within 3 or 4 years of continued study, it was also in professional athletes, Navy, all kinds of entrepreneurs, hyper successful people, as well as a bunch of drug addicts. And so they, obviously start to dive deeper. But, I'm primarily a clinician working one-on-one, and I got, a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California. And I had, hanging out in my little office, never marketed myself, never did anything. And I've got, pitching to EO groups and full practice. And then working with my Bujinkan, my martial arts teacher, a guy named Randy Kelly. And I've been a long time competitive shooter. I love long range shooting.
Love it.
So, and he was a Navy SEAL sniper, and he was opposite Chris Kyle. I mean, he was the real deal. And so we came up with this idea of, hey, let's go take entrepreneurs and take them shooting, but use that as a means of teaching them how to meditate. Getting the ADD people to lay down and really focus.
Yeah.
Which is a gift of being driven. We have this capacity to really drop into the present. And it's called neuropeptide Y, something I'm also very into. But this neuropeptide is why we can get that laser focus, incredible laser focus. And we backed into this incredible experience. And so we take entrepreneurs and we go out shooting from 300, 600, 900, 1,200 yards. And then I got a range in Ohio, we shoot out to a mile.
Wow.
Yeah. And
it's big boy distance.
guns. I get to deduct my guns for the IRS, so I have built the most amazing gun collection you've ever seen. And it is really, it hones in on the gift of what driven can really be.
Mhm.
And meditation is not about learning how to relax. Has nothing to do with that. It's learning how to be present. And so out of that came this experience, and I'm sitting there doing these 3-day, 2-day shooting experiences with people. And I had a guy named Jason Gagnard and Clay Bear show up to this thing.
Mhm.
And they're waiting for the $10,000 mastermind pitch at the end. They're waiting, and I got nothing. I don't even have a webpage. And they called me out. They said, "What the hell are you doing? You know how many people you can help? Entrepreneurs that need this." And most people during that shooting experience really drop into their body for the first time, and they really drop into a place of heart, for lack of a better word. And you don't typically experience crying when you're shooting, but it's such a profoundly beautiful experience of touching your true potential that guys just go, "Oh," and it allows them to actually see what they can do.
Mhm.
And so Jason invited me to pitch meditation at his mastermind, and that was the first time I had ever been in a room with 175 drivens at the same time like that.
Yeah.
I walked in there and I was home. And it was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is.
Just felt
And
right.
then, yeah, Tucker Max was in the room, and became a really dear friend. And he said, "Dude, I'll help you write a book," and the rest is history. I mean,
Mhm.
so it's, still very reluctant to scale. All the scale pointers out there. Oh, you got to scale. You got to scale. You got to scale. I've just been very hesitant to, because there's a lot of bullshit in the coaching world.
Sure is.
A lot of bullshit, and byproduct of all of that, because what driven really is underneath is an adaptation to trauma. We're designed to live in a traumatizing world as driven. And because of that, because of circumstance, a guy named Peter Levine was actually my dissertation chair's roommate at Berkeley.
Mhm.
So this was mid 90s, and he says, "You got to meet this guy." And so I meet Peter Levine in San Diego, and started all of his training. So I'm underneath all of this, I'm really a trauma healer.
Mhm.
So that shooting mixed in with it really well.
Yeah.
So but then I wrote Driven, and it's been, it's just opened up my world, allowed me to get out of San Diego 5 years ago and move to Tennessee, and I live on 10 acres and building a 5-acre bass pond in my backyard, and had a shooting range in my backyard. So it's been exponentially greater than I ever could imagine. So it's been fantastic
Yeah.
ride.
So with that, for those who are listening, because I was once the person who was on the fence, like, I don't know if I'm going to do that. If you have the inclination, you have the want, you have the need, you have the itch, go write the fucking book. Please do it. It's that simple. It's very similar with me. My book came out in June of 2019. And I had been trying to get on stage for a big event in the mobile electronics industry for probably 2 years prior to that. And every one of my pitches, attempts to contact, fell on deaf ears. The book comes out in June. Mid-July, first or second week of July, I'm getting phone calls from the association asking me to come speak.
Yep.
And then it just snowballed from there. So go ahead and do it. Do the work. It's going to suck at times. It's going to be a never-ending project that you're like, oh, wow, I thought this thing was done. And meanwhile, you're not even halfway through it.
And for me, this book too, the second book that I'm working, it is one of the most organizing experiences. And it's horrible at first. And it's really trying to figure out what not to say.
Yeah.
But it sorts through your own BS in such a wonderful way. And you get to the kernels of, and most coaches really don't have a product that they're really trying to sell. It's just, "I'll coach you on what?" Well, yeah, I got some program, but write a book and you get down to the kernel of what the hell you're trying to do. It's really it was a phenomenal experience for me.
Yeah. Love it. Any idea or any, this was the wrong way to say it. I did not do this with the first book, and it's something that I learned about later. And moving forward, I probably will do things more along the lines with this. But do you have any content? Do you have any courses, any structured trainings that are going to align with either the first or even now the second book that comes out?
Yeah, I've taken probably 2,500 people through the shooting retreat, and that's been a COVID obviously killed all of it, but it is something that I'm actually doing again, and
Mhm,
that is a great experience. I do. I'm in the process of building a network, and
mhm,
so it's a driven network of really finding, what we're different, and part of our identity issue, and that's really what I sell is a change of identity.
yeah,
Uh, you ask a normal, non-driven, neurotypical, who they are, and they have this single thinker up in their head that knows who they are. They have a narrative and it's nice and clean. And
mhm,
they don't question it like we do. You
mhm,
ask a driven who you are, and it's like we're Da Vinci's, man. We're all over the map. So we tend to, most of us do, tend to use our emotions as the basis of our identity.
mm,
And I could have called driven the shame-based personality type. And because it is this chronic discontented, feeling like you're never enough,
mhm,
feeling like there's never going to be enough. And we talked about the imposter syndrome. That is the core of those genetics underneath, that it just feels like there's something missing or wrong. We tend to make an identity out of that, something
mm,
missing or wrong with me.
yeah,
And then we can be launched into perfectionism or launched into hyper success. Coming out of this, my doctoral dissertation was about something called self-sabotage
mhm,
and self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah,
And it is what we are famous for. We drivens, we're designed to live in a much harder, challenging world.
mhm,
And we make everything harder than it has to be.
yeah. So if it's not hard, we're going to subconsciously make it hard.
Or procrastinate until it is. And
Mhm,
so it is. And it's really cracking that has
mhm,
been the last 10 years of my work.
yeah,
And driven gets into it. The last third of driven is really tools and tricks and why meditation is not an option for us. It is
got it.
truly not an option.
Yeah,
And once you get into it and understand, meditation is not, most meditations are created by farmers for farmers.
mm,
And if you try a farmer meditation, sit quietly and imagine a green, peaceful field. I got a green, peaceful field with a bunch of naked chicks and pizza and everything running all over the place. It's like that
yeah,
does not make me relax.
mhm,
And so, it is an eye-open meditation is required for driven people. We're scipally dominant, and
mhm,
I happen to my doctoral dissertation chair happened to be a Zen practitioner, longtime Zen practitioner.
mhm,
And interestingly, in Japan, there's two sects of Zen. There's Soto Zen,
mhm,
Soto Zen, which arose out of the rice farmers, and it's very peaceful, very calm, very linear, very structured. And then you have Rinzai, and Rinzai is the sect that speaks to driven. It's the samurais, it's the warriors, it's the really the military, and it is an eye-open meditation, and it's about
mhm,
presenting
mm,
and constantly being coming back to the present. And so it and about killing of that identity of you're not your feelings, you're not your thoughts. Then who am I? And I solved that problem and driven by simply answering it with what am I?
yeah,
What you are is a monkey.
mhm,
You're a Homo sapien, and what you are is a driven monkey, and that makes you different. And then
mhm,
once you get that foundation and you start to put in these practices, you start to really embrace the gift of what it means to be driven.
yeah,
But we don't fit into, that's my joke too. Most of us we are unemployable. I mean, we temporarily we can fake it. We partner okay,
yeah,
but we working for somebody else that's telling us how to do stuff that we don't
mhm,
have the flexibility on. We last minutes, man. I mean,
mhm,
we cubicle hell is not something we can tolerate.
yeah. My record's 3 years.
That's pretty good. Most is 18 months.
Yeah. So I want to backtrack here on meditation for a minute, and you're talking about something that a bit different than the traditional things we hear with meditation. You're talking about eye open meditation. So I'm taking that as you are meditating literally with your eyes open. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's a way of learning discernment, and
Hmm.
that's really the core of this. And since you haven't read Driven, and most of your listeners probably haven't either, I'll give you the Buddha metaphor for it. So the Buddha noticed that we are very much like an Indian elephant. That's our body,
Hmm.
with a bunch, and because you're driven, with a bunch of monkeys up on top trying to control it.
Hmm.
And this was my doctoral dissertation. This is why January sucks at the gym, because everyone's monkey mind
Hmm.
has temporarily, your monkey mind can imagine a six pack of abs and, big arms. And, um, but what happens in February?
Yeah.
You may go for 3 weeks, a month, but then your body, your elephant starts to make decisions for you, starts to resist. Most people either create, a bunch of bullshit cheerleaders in their head. Oh, come on, monkeys, or a big gorilla that beats the shit out of the elephant to do it.
Hmm.
And that's the classic Buddha question then, where is Thomas? Which one are you?
Hmm.
Are you the monkeys or are you the elephant, do you think?
Well, it's a good question. I would say that I'm the elephant.
Yeah, as most drivens do. Interestingly, normals only have one monkey in their head.
Mm.
And so it's a different world for them. And it is a trick question, as most Buddha questions are. The answer is obviously both,
Hmm.
and capital A and D double underlined, neither.
Mm.
And it's that third element is the secret to it. That drivens really have the capacity to have this observer. And that's why we can be chameleons in any situation we go into. I can put on a different monkey suit and go into, the bank. I can go into Starbucks. I can go into my kid's classroom. And I seem to take on these different identities. But the knower, the one who's up here watching this, is the real you.
Mm.
And that mind, body, soul, it's been around for 50,000 years.
Hmm.
If if anyone ever tells you they really have it figured out, run.
Hmm.
It's a cult. It's nothing. No one's got it all figured out. But the discernment between them, and this is the book I have coming up first of the year, this third book, and it's really, one of the problems with being driven is that we got 19 monkeys up there struggling for control over the elephant.
Yeah.
And I got one that wants to go bass fishing all the time. I got another one who wants to make money. I got another one who wants to do this. Another one who wants to do this. And yeah, what should I do?
Hmm.
It's the soul is the one we got to put in the driver's seat.
Mm.
And I'm a big practitioner. I do breath work, meditate, and cold plunge every morning. And in that cold plunge is the greatest teaching tool I've ever come across. Because my monkeys and elephant want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But my knower, this third thing, I know it's good for me.
Hmm.
And so when I go completely under, I got the Ice Barrel 500, so I can go completely submerged. It's on a chillers and it's under 40. It's cold. I can experience the imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
Like, who is this underneath the water, freezing? And because I don't feel like a badass, I don't feel like, I'm just there, present to the whole experience. But in that is where I get the true freedom.
Hmm.
And with practice, and so meditation is learning to observe, just the thoughts. And the only part of us that isn't present is our thinking. And this monkey mind is a time machine. The elephant is a very simple recording device, and what it is recording is just the present moment.
Hmm.
And so any sensations you feel in the elephant, and Carl Jung made it very simple that the lowercase self is really the monkey mind and the elephant working together. That's your ego, your
Yeah.
fear-based ego. And for drivens, we got a very complex ego because we've got so many damn decision makers in our head.
Hmm.
But the capital S self, or the authentic self, true self, soul self is what Carl Jung called it, is the relationship between your soul and your elephant. And that's where trauma healing comes in, and and it is, sabotage is so important for drivens to really figure out, because we have a drive. We're basically made like Ferraris. We have drive like nothing else. We're living in a very simple world to survive in. Really, it is a stupidly simple world to survive in.
Sure it is.
But we're never satisfied. We're never enough.
Yeah.
And so we can create these amazing worlds. And understanding how the monkey mind can imagine all kinds of six-pack abs. But the elephant wants the familiar. And so that's lottery winners. Something else I looked at in my dissertation, what happens to lottery winners?
Sure.
And 3 to 5 years later, it is you're bankrupt, you're broke, and getting chased in debt, and your family hates you. You're alone. It's the worst thing in the world to happen to you. Why? Because your body does not know how to adjust to the new world. And so how do you learn to adjust the body to the new world is meditation. Is that curious ability to actually experience, how does it feel to get a PhD, or how does it feel to be in a cold plunge?
Yeah.
I hadn't, well, it's not what I expected. Exactly. That's your monkey mind just blowing rainbows up your ass.
Right. Yeah.
But your elephant is always, and you can sit in that curiosity and wonderment, which is that observer, which is the part of us that is made like the reflection of God. And so it becomes a very spiritual thing.
Sure.
Not religion. It's very spiritual.
Yep. I agree. So suggestion for anybody who wants to get into meditation, any good resources you can name?
My book is one. And then I actually, the only course that I have still up, I had a couple earlier, but I have a meditation course on my website. And it is 6 weeks. And I start everybody at 2 minutes of meditation. 2 minutes of meditation somewhere in the morning where your cortisol levels are the highest. And the point of it is not to relax. The point of it is really to actually hear the monkey mind talking you out of it or into it. Most importantly is feeling the resistance to doing it. And that once you can feel that elephant's resistance, and then your monkey mind, I'll do it later. You can feel that resistance. And this is the magic takeaway of my shooting retreat too. There is no resistance in the present moment. There is no recoil in the present moment. And I've got I don't know if there's any gun guys out there. I shoot a 375 Chitec, so I've got some big guns. It's
you got
literally a 2-mile gun. It is no joke. And you can actually experience the bullet going down the barrel with this thing if you're present enough. And there is no recoil. But if you're anticipating recoil, if you're anticipating what the cold plunge is going to feel like, and that elephant is resisting, you're not present. Once that starts to happen in meditation, and 2 minutes, turns into 4 minutes, turns into 8 minutes, turns into 20 minutes. And then I throw breath work in. And once you get about 6 months of meditation in your belt, I strongly encourage a real breath work practice, which stirs up the trauma. But that ability to actually get this resistance out of the body and feel yourself moving into anything you want to do. And that's the good news and the bad news. The good news is you can do anything you want. The bad news is you have no excuse to do anything. So it is once you embrace what it means to be driven and you get this because of our soul awareness, man, we create lives that the farmers look at and just like, how the hell do you have, you love being a dad, you make tons of money and you have so much freedom, and that's where meditation will take you.
I love it. So where did the assessment come from on your website? From an operations standpoint, like how did you guys go and create that thing and make it a reality as well that you're delivering to people who go and visit the website?
Yeah. So PhDs don't come easy. I'm a researcher and I have imposter syndrome. I do not want to be inauthentic and out of integrity. I don't want to be blowing bullshit because there's a lot of it out there. And so I took all my clinical skills and actually made a true 50 question and then sent it out to a national norming agency and had it nationally normed and then statistically validated and looked at the reliabilities, and it's a good measure. It's a real clinical measure of those 10 traits.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into it, and that is this book I have coming out. It's called Sheep, Wolves, and Shepherd.
Sure.
But it's looking at how we're different and what co-varies. And so it's being driven is one part of it. But then we have all these different kinds of drivens.
Yeah.
You have door kicker seals that just want to break through the door, and then you have snipers, that are real sneaky. It's just different types, and you have visionaries, and you have implementers, integrators, and part of my big practice, business consulting practice, is really putting together entrepreneurial teams that are balanced in a way where the deficit in one is a complement to another. So
yeah, it's very important. I've been a part of teams where we figure that out, and when you figure it out and you actually see it happen in real life, it's a game changer.
Oh, it is rocket fuel. Literally is
literally.
Yeah, literally. It's amazing. It's cheat code. It's cheat code.
Yeah.
And you don't want the door kickers going in and talking to the bank, by the way.
No.
You don't.
Not at all. So go back to the assessment for a second. You've probably had thousands of these submitted since inception and launch on your site and whatnot. When you look at someone's assessment, you can probably understand a lot about that person in a very, very short period of time.
With the assessment and about 10 minutes of talking, I can pick people.
Yeah. Got it.
And it is the next book that's coming out, Sheep, Wolves, and Shepherds, is really looking at what's going on. So Driven was written to the driven person. And this next book is really written about us in society and the role we're going to need to play. It's both a blessing and a curse to you personally, and it's also a blessing and a curse to the world. I mean, Genghis Khan was driven. So was Hitler. And so is Fauci.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys run a big pharma and big military industrial complex and all that are just, driven, greedy assholes and preying on the sheep, and the sheep are the ones who are living by narrative land. And so I think as drivens, we have a responsibility to really, to see our role in this society as because we're watching it go off a cliff, and I think we can stop it. I think the entrepreneurs that have good hearts, that don't want to, that are more than just about money.
Yeah, I agree. So here's a question. You got driven people, and then you've got non-driven people. What is some advice you can give a driven person to go integrate or interact with non-driven people? Because it can be very difficult for a driven person to interact with someone who's not driven.
I dedicate a chapter to that in the book. So it is first and foremost, understanding the difference is so freeing. That they have one monkey in their head, and they have a vested interest in keeping their narrative alive. Their narrative is what keeps them out of their body. And, they don't want to be in their body because it's scary. And so they, need to just wear your mask or whatever it is, and we scare the crap out of the sheep because we can run circles around them. We can, manipulate them very easily. We can shapeshift, we can look like a sheep. We can hide from them for the most part. But as another one of my teachers said, forgive them for they know not what they do. They really don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an off comment, but it's, they're NPCs, man. They're non-player characters.
Yep.
And, the drivens, the real player of your life is your soul. And getting that guy in the driver's seat is the game here. And when you do, have compassion for him. And all the entrepreneurs that I work with that scale and actually go from, 5 million to 30 million to 50 million, and you go from, 5 employees that are all driven to hundreds of employees, and 90% of them are sheep. They love predictability. They love being in a cubicle. They don't need challenge. They don't need what we need. But that alone can really help. That alone. And, getting them, and I have trained more executive assistants to, tolerate us. And, and that's the joke about Steve Jobs. I mean, just, we're drivens, and we will get fired once it turns into a big farm. But you can't scale a hunting organization. You can only scale a farm. And so learning how to build a farm and getting a team in there that lets it become operationalized, and then get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And build some barriers between you and the farmers, because you just scare them, for the most part.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Sarah, this has been awesome. I appreciate you coming in here today and dropping some of your many decades of knowledge and understanding. I've definitely picked up a couple of things, got 2 pages of notes sitting in front of me that I didn't even realize I was writing down as we're having this conversation. I am definitely going to personally go and grab your book, Driven. I want to read it. It seems extremely interesting, and I'm sure I'll learn some more stuff from it. And I'm also going to suggest the listeners here, because if someone's listening to this podcast and they listen to me run my big mouth every damn week for the last 4 years, chances are they're a driven human too. So where can we go find your book? That's the first question. Then I've got another one after that.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you've always felt like there's something different about you and you feel like you don't fit in, worst case is that you really feel like there's something wrong with you. There's not. There's nothing wrong with you. You're supposed to be this way. All things Dr. Doug is at iamdriven.com. That's the one place, and you get the book, get first 3 chapters free if you just want to check it out. Took me 2 years to do the audio. I mean, my imposter syndrome is like, I really, the reluctant messiah complex is right in the face. And so but it's on audio, and
Great.
That is, and it's 7 hours of me talking.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I did audio with my book as well. And I was interviewing a podcast guest, former Army, I think it was lieutenant or maybe something different. Anyway, he worked with a former Navy SEAL. These 2 guys started a company. They wrote a book, and I was having an interview with one of them, and I felt the same way. These are guys who have done some really hard shit in their lives through their military careers. And they said it was one of the most demanding, physically and mentally demanding things they have ever done, was sitting down and recording the audio for their book in 48 hours. And I was like, yeah, like it took me about 2 months of doing little bits here and there. And I dreaded going to have to sit in front of the damn microphone and record my own book.
I turned everything into a meditation practice. And so the resistance of how I thought I would sound fell away to actually how fun it was to actually be able to put emotion into the words.
Yeah.
And so a hack, if ADD brains don't know this, it is, you can listen to about 1.5 or 1.7 and read at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you get the visual of the words, put a 3x5 note card, and then listen as fast, and you retain. It's as if you're burning the book right into your soul. I mean, it is, and it is a cheat code for me, and I can burn through books now like crazy. So
I agree.
It works with mine, and I said the words correctly.
Yeah.
So it's something you can do. Yeah. Well, thank you
Awesome.
for your time, man. This has been a blast.
Dr. Doug, thank you for coming in here. This has been great. And I look forward to reading the book and reconnecting with you when the new one comes out. Have a great day.
I will. You too.
Thank you for tuning in to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Make sure you head over to stepitupentrepreneur.com and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast.